Hello, welcome to the Humanities Kansas Grants Chat for 2025. My name is Leslie Von Holten. I am Director of Grants and Outreach here at Humanities Kansas. And with this video, I'll just share some tips and tricks and best practices to help you get the best, strongest grant application to submit to our deadlines this year. So welcome. Here at Humanities Kansas, we are leading a movement of ideas, and we do this by supporting a number, just many, many hundreds of projects across the state of Kansas that connect us as Kansans, share our history, and explore new ideas. Here on the screen, you'll see just a very small handful of the work that we support. Short film project, The African American Pioneers, which was filmed in Nicodemus. There's a culture preservation project going on in Lindsborg. We have an ongoing oral history project to preserve the stories of Vietnam veterans. And then we also like to explore ideas and environmental thought through poetry. Like I said, this is just a very small handful of the projects that we have funded with grants. So, what are the humanities? This is a question that we get often, and it's understandable. So, I start the conversation by, think back to your high school days when you were taking a social studies class, or civics, or literature. The humanities are those disciplines that explore what it means to be human and how humans are connected across generations, across nationalities and race. It really is these disciplines help us see, how we're the same and how we're different. The humanities disciplines are literature, history, philosophy and ethics, cultural studies, archaeology, religious studies, jurisprudence and law, art history, and social sciences that lean more into the humanistic content rather than those data tables. You see that I mentioned art history, and I do want to touch on this a little bit because a common question that we get is what is the difference between the arts and the humanities? It's an understandable question because many of us think of the arts and humanities as hand in hand. They're both culture. But because much of our funding here at Humanities Kansas is from the National Endowment for the Humanities, and then our partners over at the Kansas Arts Commission, much of their funding is from the National Endowment for the Arts. We do have to sort of mind the line between the arts and humanities. So to do this, to help explain a little bit better, I like to bring up Kansas's native son, Gordon Parks, who grew up in Fort Scott, and the difference between the arts and the humanities in relation to his work, as an example. So, as we know, Gordon Parks was a pioneer in photography. He was the first African American photographer for Life magazine. He was just a phenomenally gifted and artistic visionary, and quite the Renaissance man. He was a novelist, a filmmaker, a music composer. And so much of his output, however, was the creation of art. For example, The Learning Tree, the novel that he wrote, much of it inspired by his life in Fort Scott growing up. And then later on, the film that he produced, also called The Learning Tree. Unfortunately, Humanities Kansas would not have been able to support either one of these projects because they are the creation of art. However, Humanities Kansas has supported many projects about Gordon Parks because they explore his work in the context and provide analysis of his work in a historical and local, place-based context. An example here is the Learning Tree film scene location signage, interpretive signs that you will find around Fort Scott. I do highly recommend taking the tour, going to Fort Scott, such a charming town, and such an interesting tour that you can follow with these signs that provide history, provide historic photos from the filming of the movie. It's really a wonderful project. This is considered humanities, and that is because it is taking artistic output from Gordon Parks and it is contextualizing and analyzing it, and so people can understand more of the background and the history of it. I understand that seeing that line between arts and humanities can be very confusing. We get confused ourselves sometimes about it. So do please reach out to me before you apply for a grant to see if your project is suited for Humanities Kansas, or perhaps the Kansas Arts Commission would be a better place to go. Okay, the basics of Humanities Kansas grants. First of all, the humanities must be central to the project. We are Humanities Kansas. Our mission is to get the public humanities out into our communities. Projects must engage an adult, out-of-school public audience. The key audience needs to be adults who are no longer students. You can apply for projects that will include children, but the primary audience needs to be adults. All in-state Kansas nonprofits are eligible to apply for our grants, and you can only have one open Humanities Kansas grant at a time. So before you apply for your next project or the next phase of your project, do be sure that you have closed out your previous grant. And then this is a federal rule and needs to be followed, of course. Unique entity ID from sam.gov is required. Many Kansas nonprofits already have a UEID, but you do want to check in sam.gov to make sure that it is up to date, that it is not expired, and also that it is publicly viewable so I can confirm it when you submit your application. If you do not have a UEID yet, but you want to apply for a grant, please apply through sam.gov before you submit your application. I do need to be able to confirm the UEID before your application goes forward to the review committee. If you are having trouble with sam.gov, and I do want to say that usually it's an easy process, but every once in a while there will be a hiccup. Just keep communication open with me during that process. And then some new aspects of Humanities Kansas grants within the last couple of years that I wanted to highlight. Accessibility funds. We want these programs to be accessible to as many Kansans as possible. And so sometimes that means, for example, paying a sign language interpreter for an event or translating your exhibit text, pardon me, into Spanish to reach other parts of your community. Audio tours for exhibits also. Many of us are working in historic buildings, and as we know, ADA compliance is quite a challenge. So if you need to rent a wheelchair ramp for an event, you can also write that into the accessibility funds. I do want to note that unfortunately we cannot support a permanent wheelchair ramp, but a rental of one for an event is definitely eligible. These funds are in addition to your grant award. So for example, if your project, you're requesting the full $15,000 for the Humanities for All grant, you can add on top of that $250 for the wheelchair ramp rental. So your full request would be $15,250. We do deposit the grant funds directly into your bank account, and these payments will come from bill.com. So if you receive the good news that you have been awarded a Humanities Kansas grant, you will get an invitation from bill.com to set up your secure account through them to receive the grant funds. Formal, I, pardon me, formal community partnerships are required. This means that if you have a community-focused project, you must have support from an organization within that community. For example, if you are working from a university and applying through the university, but your project is, for example, looking at a cultural issue or history in Hayes, you do need a formal community partnership from someone in Hayes. We do believe that communities tell their stories well, and so we want to be sure that the communities are aware of the stories that are being told about them. And then once you receive the good news that you've been awarded a Humanities Kansas grant, there will be a post-award online video and a quiz that I will send to you before the grant funds are deposited into your account. This is just a brief video and a simple quiz to ensure that you are aware of some of the key issues with handling grant funds. Okay, now I'm going to review our three main grant initiative or grant programs here at Humanities Kansas. I will say, I encourage you to apply, or I encourage you to sign up for our e-news because sometimes we do have grant opportunities that pop up. For instance, if the Mellon Foundation provides funding for a specific project, or we have additional funds and have a new grant initiative out there, you will learn about it the minute we announce it if you are signed up for our e-news. However, our three main grant programs that we have are the Culture Preservation Grants, the Humanities for All grants, and Action Grants. And I will review each of those now. So, culture preservation grants preserve and create access to historical or cultural resources that document stories of life in Kansas. These grants are up to $3,500, and they are a partnership between Humanities Kansas and the Kansas Historical Society. We offer these with three deadlines in 2025, February 28th, May 16th, and October 3rd. So I think of the culture preservation grants as sort of technical grants. They provide things to help preserve historical items or to digitize them and make them available to larger audiences. For example, you'll see this photo here of the Tulloch Bowman Family Papers Project in Leavenworth. This project came about because there was a family member of the Tulloch Bowman family who lived on the East Coast and had just boxes and boxes of important history from the family. Fortunately, that person recognized that not only was it important family history, it was important history to the city of Leavenworth, because the Tullocks and Bowmans were key business leaders in the early founding days of Leavenworth. So the Leavenworth Historical Society received this material and had a lot of work ahead of them to do. The Culture Preservation Grant provided $3,500 and technical expertise to help them scan documents and photographs for preservation, to buy acid-free boxes, folders, to work on a new catalog system for all of these materials so they could be found in the future. It was a great help to them, and I encourage just every museum, every historical society should be looking at these grants because they will provide. Who doesn't need more acid-free boxes, for example? So do please consult with Humanities Kansas if you want to do a culture preservation project, and we can work on how you build your story and your identify the needs that you have for the project. Unfortunately, colleges and universities are not eligible for the culture preservation funds. Okay, Humanities for All grants. So these grants are up to $15,000 and it's for projects that are very public facing. The Humanities for All grants bring people together to talk about ideas. It's that movement of ideas that we are leading. We have three deadlines in 2025, same as the Culture Preservation grants, February 28th, May 16th, and October 3rd. These grants support exhibits, podcasts, panel discussions, presentation series, film discussions. These are just some of the ideas out there. I will note engagement with the public is key. And also, we encourage creativity and innovation with this grant program. Action grants are very similar to the Humanities for All grants in that they are also public-facing projects. Engagement with the public is key. Creativity and innovation are encouraged. But the benefit of the action grants, they're up to $3,500 and we don't have a deadline for them. We accept these grants as long as we have the grant funds available. You do need to submit your application at least 6 weeks before the first event date, and this just ensures that that there's time for us to turn around the grant, for instance, and hopefully award it, you to receive the funds, and also for you to be able to promote your project so that you can build a good audience and good excitement for the project. Again, exhibitions, podcasts, town hall discussions, panel discussions. With technology nowadays, we've also had a couple of organizations do short film projects with these very small grants. Book discussions are popular in this grant program as well. But again, we're open to creativity and new ideas. One key aspect of Humanities Kansas grants is the involvement of a humanities scholar. This ensures that, for example, if you're doing a history project, this ensures that your history is up to date, as we know that history and interpretation can change over time as new information is discovered, and new research is presented to the public. The humanities scholar can help brainstorm. They share their expertise. They can provide content. They can come to your community and do a presentation. They really do enrich the project. They are required also for Humanities Kansas grants. If you do not know a humanities scholar that would be a good fit for your project, reach out to us. As you can imagine, we have quite a good network and we can probably find someone who would be a good fit for your project. To be a humanities scholar, the person must have a master's degree or higher in a humanities discipline, or they're a humanities professional, for example, a museum curator or a librarian who has demonstrated expertise in a particular topic over time. And then also culture bearers, such as a tribal elder, can serve as your humanities scholar. Okay, now we're going to walk through the grant guidelines. I'd like to point out some key aspects of the guidelines. The grant guidelines are your friend. You do want to refer to them as you are not only designing your grant application, but designing your project too. This will help you turn an idea into a plan. So on page 4 of the grant guidelines, for all of our grants, you will find a list of things that the funds can pay for. Part-time or temporary staff who are working on the project. Honoraria for those scholars who are required is covered by the grants. Some in-state travel reimbursement, archival materials, um, duplication and digitization costs. Some equipment, it can't be more than 25% of the grant request. Same with promotions, up to 25% of the grant request can be promoting the project. Once you look at the list, if you need something for your project, but you don't see it on the list, do reach out to us. And then there are some things that the funds cannot pay for. Salaries for full-time staff, This includes faculty at universities or colleges, publishing a book or a catalog, historical reenactors. We cannot support student projects. We cannot pay for food or beverages or promotional giveaways. There's a list again on page 4 of the grant guidelines. And on page 5, we have the application step by step. This will walk you through the application that's in our online portal so you know what to expect and what will be asked of you as you are shaping your project and preparing to apply for the grant. So, some tips and tricks, some best practices in grant writing. So there are a few questions in the grant narrative that are in that step-by-step guideline. And the narrative, most people who are working in the humanities are really good at this part. We like to tell our stories and we like to say what our project is. So, some things to keep in mind is clarity. Be sure you clearly describe your project very early in the narrative. This helps our grant reviewers see that, for example, you're doing a short film and a series of presentations in 3 communities in Northwest Kansas, for example. The earlier that our grant reviewers can see clearly what the project is, the easier it is for them to decipher and understand more of the history of and the goals of your project. Be concise. Be sure the narrative uses plain language. Our reviewers are come from all walks of life. We have humanities scholars and librarians and museum directors in our review committees, but we also have bankers and business leaders and farmers and ranchers. And so not everybody speaks the language of your particular organization. So be sure it's in plain language that everyone can understand. Directness, the narrative gets to the point. I will say that most of our grant reviewers will be reading between 15 and 20 applications. That's a lot of reading, so you really want to be clear and direct so they understand what you're asking them for. And then keep in mind that the audience of your grant application is the grant reviewers. You're not making a pitch to the marketing team. You're not trying to sell it to the city commission. You're trying to sell the project to the grant reviewers. And then be sure it's accurate. Once you write the narrative and then you work out the budget, do a read through and make sure the numbers mentioned in the narrative also match the budget. And then grammatical correctness. And I say this because, these are competitive grants. And so you want to demonstrate your capability with the success of the project. And a messy grant application can unfortunately make some folks think maybe um, we'll fund this other project instead. So just, check for grammatical correctness. And I encourage people have a board member of your organization do a read through of your grant application to see, it's always good to have extra eyes on these projects. And then the budget. We're humanities folks. We like to tell a story. And many, many times I will have somebody say, "Oh, I'm a humanities person. I don't do numbers." Don't fear the numbers. The grant application is a request for funding, which is money, which is represented in numbers. And then think of money and the numbers as another way to tell your story. They do demonstrate your plan, and if you follow the guidelines step by step, you will have more success with that budget. Don't be intimidated. Provide a clear narrative in your budget, and I will show an example of that in a moment. You can also repeat and clarify your goals within the budget. Um, you know, you can connect, oh, okay, they need to travel to these 3 communities in Northwest Kansas, and I see that travel is written into this grant application. And then again, to answer the questions, this is when having extra eyes on your application before you submit it really pays back in dividends. Somebody can see if there's anything missing. I'm a former grant writer myself, and I remember what it was like to have the whole project so clear in my own mind. But if you gave it to, when I would give the application to somebody else, they could point out, like, what did you mean by this? And oh, aren't you missing this part? So, really, really encourage you to have extra eyes on your applications before they're submitted. Okay, here are examples, and I won't read through all of this in detail, but I do want to encourage a strong budget narrative. As we often say here at Humanities Kansas, the grant reviewers are not comfortable providing funding to something they don't understand or to sort of this aspect of the project that they're not quite sure how the money will be spent. So this is where a strong budget narrative comes in. So for example, these are examples from grants that I see often. A strong budget narrative for would show us that the project director, Jane Smith, who is working part-time on the project, is going to put 80 hours toward it at $25 an hour. And this is, we are requesting $2,000. Um, Honoraria, $500 flat fee is going to the consultant. If it were a vague budget narrative, it would just say $2,000 for project staff. Well, there's too many questions there. Who are the project staff? How much are they being paid? How many hours is this going to take? Who's getting this $2,000? Same with the honoraria. $500 is written into the budget table, but it's blank here. Who's getting the honoraria? A vague budget narrative just leaves too many questions. And this is an example of what the budget form looks like on our grant portal. And I will talk about our portal more in a minute. But I wanted to talk about cost share. So you will see, and you will have known this already from reading the step-by-step guideline in the grant guidelines, but this is also on page 8 if you want to revisit it. Every grant request must come with cost share that is equal to or more than the money being requested. So, for example, if you are requesting $8,000 for a grant, you will also have to have cost share that is $8,000 or more that demonstrates to us that there is interest in this project at the community level. You just need a little more funding to get it across the finish line. So cost share can be confusing. I totally get that. It is a way to document your local contributions. So this can be money that's going into the project. For example, if your executive director who is full-time but will be working on the project, you would put her salary into cost share. Humanities Kansas grants cannot pay for her salary, but she's contributing to the project, and so you can put that in cost share. And then it's not always cash. Sometimes it's, often a newspaper will donate promotions. That can go into promotions cost share, what it would have cost you to pay for those advertisements, for instance. And then think of time as money. If you have volunteers who are working on the project, of course, they're not costing you any money, but they are putting effort toward the project, and that effort is communicated through cost share. So you put a dollar value to that time that they spend on the project, and you put that in cost share. Some common budget mistakes. Again, that read through and having those extra eyes on your application will help, but the numbers don't add up. The numbers from the narrative to the budget don't connect, or the numbers from the budget table and the budget narrative are not the same. So do pay attention as you're doing your read through to fix that mistake. something I call budget ghosts. This, for example, one time we had an application where a filmmaker was not never mentioned in the narrative, and then all of a sudden $5,000 for a filmmaker was in the budget. So it was very confusing for everyone. We didn't know what the film was going to be about or who the filmmaker was. So I know as you're planning projects, these things come up and down. So again, that final read through really makes a difference. Ineligible requests. I will say that if you submit an application and something that you've requested is ineligible, chances are I will follow up with you and let you know. And then we can rework that budget. But again, do look at the grant guidelines. I've mentioned this already. Different numbers are mentioned in the narrative compared to the budget table. And a vague budget narrative can be very confusing. You want your budget narrative, the point of the budget narrative is to answer questions, not present questions. Okay, now it's time. You're ready. You have your plan in place. You have your numbers from the budget office. You are ready to apply. So if you have found this video, you likely are very familiar with our the Humanities Kansas website. And you will find over here Action, Humanities for All grants, and Culture Preservation grants. And you click on the one that you are wanting to apply for. You'll scroll down to that main information page and find the grant guidelines button. Then when you get to the guidelines, you will see that we have different lines here. So this is the main guidelines for the grant program, and you definitely want to check those. But for some projects, we have what we call supplemental requirements, best practices, and application questions. Those application questions are in the main grant guidelines, so they won't be a surprise to you. But I do encourage you to check out these supplemental requirements because often we have shared some best practices, some considerations, and some ideas with you to, for example, get the best oral history project that you can. Same for Humanities for All and for action grants. We have the main guidelines here. And then we have supplementals for exhibitions, media projects, which are short films, podcasts, broadcasts, book discussions, and outdoor signage. You're ready to apply. You click on the apply button and it will bring you to our grant portal. This is hosted by Foundant, which is a grant application that you maybe have come across with other grant applications that you've done. You will need to create an account here, and there is a video that's available through Foundant if you would like to learn more through that. But setting up an account is quite simple. And this is your dashboard. This is what you will see. According to this dashboard, I don't have any active requests, but I do have an application from the past, and I can access that here if I wanted to click on it. But I show you the dashboard because up here, if you're wanting to apply for something new, the button is up here. I feel like it should be a little more obvious, but there it is. You click on apply on your dashboard and you will get to a list of everything that is available through Humanities Kansas that's currently taking applications. What this means is that it's not only grants that are listed on this page, it's also our Speakers Bureau, our Talk About Literature in Kansas. Currently, we have Written in the Stars, which is our poetry project. So there are a number of things here. So be sure that you look for Culture Preservation Grant or Action in Humanities for All grants, and that you go into the right grant application. And that apply button is right there. Okay, we're winding it down. So, I want to leave you with some of these 6 pro tips for successful grant applicants. Again, don't be intimidated by that budget. Know that that budget also tells a story. Have a plan in place when you apply. It does break my heart every once in a while. I will get an application where I can see somebody has an idea and they just kind of want to see if it sticks. And so they submit their application, but they don't have, for example, they don't have quotes for the cost of supplies and materials. They don't have the people in place. It's more of a idea, often a really great idea, but that plan has not been shaped. Like I said, our reviewers do not like to fund something that they worry does not have a clear path to success. And so, if they can tell that it's an idea, not a plan, they will not fund it. They will kick it back and ask you to shape up your plan and then submit again. So, anyway, just to say, planning is good, have a plan in place. Do you read and follow the guidelines? They are there to help. So, and also submit a draft. So, Humanities Kansas is one of the few granting organizations that will review a draft of your application before you submit it for review. I highly, highly encourage you to do this. You're not obligated to do it, but it really does help. I have sat through over 10 years of grant review meetings. I don't I'm I will say I can't always predict what will be funded, but I do know common questions that reviewers ask. And so reading and reviewing your draft will help me say, hey, you might add a line here about this. Our reviewers, I'm sure, will ask this question. Email those drafts to me at lvh@humanitieskansas.org. Don't put it in the grant portal. Email it to me. Okay, and then have again that extra set of eyes read through your narrative, including your budget and your budget narrative, to see that it's clear, concise, it's communicating what you want it to communicate, and it's answering potential questions. And with that, I will just remind you of our 2025 deadlines. They are February 28th. Drafts are due to me by January 24th. Our summer deadline is May 16th. Those drafts are due April 18th. And then our fall deadline is October 3rd, and those drafts are due on September 5th. Again, email your drafts to me, Leslie Von Holton. My email is my initials, lvh@humanitieskansas.org. And with that, we look forward to hearing more about your projects and seeing the good work that you are shaping up for 2025. Thank you.